having an amazing day. Um, Let me see. Can you guys hear me? Okay, yes, you can hear me now. I hope you're having an amazing day and you had an amazing weekend and the rest of your weekend. I'm sorry, the rest of your week is the best you've ever had. I hope life is great. Today, we're going to talk about how to get to an 800 credit score. I hear this at least once a week, at least once a week. Bonita, how do I get to an 800 score? How do I get to an 800 score? I say all the time, 700 is the win. 700 is the win. Whenever you have a 700, actually right now, when you have above a 740, that's really, really the win. An 800 score is beautiful. It's beautiful. Yes, it looks good. You know, you take a picture, you put it on the wall. Not many people in the world have 800 credit scores. So getting an 800 credit score is a goal. But usually you're able to get whatever you want if your score is above a 740. Okay. But let's answer the question, how do you get to an 800 credit score? Okay. Now, most people who have 800 credit scores have are older. They have had credit for a long period of time, right? To get to an 800 credit score, you need to have your average age of file, meaning the average of all of your open accounts needs to be above 7 years, okay? So that means usually what it means is people have 20-year-old credit cards, 15-year-old credit cards, even 30-year-old credit cards to get to 800 and above, okay? So we're gonna talk a little bit about that goodie right now. Let's go over our credit because my goal with everyone is I want you guys to really understand credit. Like again, I think it's crazy that we're judged on our credit all the time. But nobody really explains how it works. Okay. So on the first part of our series, we talked about how these 5 factors of your credit actually affect your credit score. The first one, we talked about payment history. We talked about how, anything negative on your credit report, like late payments, charge offs, collections, anything negative affects the payment history section, right? So that is and that's also where we dispute. We talked about how to dispute, what items to dispute. And if you didn't see that, it's in the archive. So please look back and watch that. I gave some really good information on the biggest part of your credit report, which is your payment history. Last time we met, we talked about my favorite, which is credit cards. We talked about where you want to keep your credit cards, how many credit cards you want to have, what types of credit cards are best to have, what limits you want to have on your credit card, where you want to keep your balances. So definitely go back and look at those, that section. And today we're going to talk about the third biggest part of your credit report, which is called your average age of file. Okay. This is how you get to the 800 credit scores. This is how you get to having pristine credit where people are like, oh my God, look at those scores. You can have whatever you want. Okay. All right. So your average age of file, what they do, it's worth 15% of your score. And they want to see basically that you've had credit for a long period of time. Okay. So they look at all of your open accounts, only open accounts. Okay. Not anything, not like, a car loan that you paid off 2 years ago that's still showing up on your credit. I have so many people who are like, Bonita, I need you to get this old car loan off my credit report. If it is not showing up late, it didn't show up late 5 years ago or anything like that, we want to leave that on your credit report. It actually looks good. When you open a credit file, when the underwriter opens a credit file and they see a whole bunch of past auto loans, houses, student loans, personal loans that were paid on time for years and then paid off and closed, that is actually a good thing. It shows that you pay your bills on time and you've borrowed money in the past and you've paid it all with no problem. Okay. So we don't really want to dispute items that are not showing up negative. Okay. But your average age of file actually only looks at your open lines of credit. Okay. open lines of credit. So that is like an open credit card, in a car loan that is open that you're currently paying on, a mortgage that you're currently paying on, a credit card that you're currently paying on, and that is open. Okay. So it looks at all of your open accounts and averages how old those accounts are. Okay. So let's say, let's do a simple one, right? Um, let's say you only have two open accounts on your credit report. Okay, you have a 2-year-old auto loan, just an auto loan that's 2 years old that you've been paying on time every month. Every month that you pay it on time, it positively affects this 35%. Okay. You have an auto loan that you've been paying for 2 years on time, and then you only have one other account. And let's say that is a 10-year-old credit card. Okay. So you have a 10-year-old credit card and a 2-year-old auto loan. So 10 plus 2 is 12, right? Now, to get the average, you have to divide that by 2 because you have two accounts, right? So 12 divided by 2 will give you 6, right? So that means that your average age of file, meaning the average age of all of your open accounts, is 6 years old. When your average age of file is older than 7 years old, and then of course everything else looks good, you're paying everything on time, all your credit cards are around 10% of the limit, then you're able to get to the 800 scores. Okay. Then you're able to get to the 800 scores. So if your average age of file is 6, like I just explained, you may be able to get to like the 780s or the 790s. That would be your highest potential score. Okay. Now, if, like, let's say I say this example all the time. Tell me where you're chiming in from. Please put in the chat. Where are you guys coming in from? Again, always put in the chat things you want to learn, because again, I'm here for you to make sure that you guys get all the good information when it comes to credit, personal credit, business credit, so that you guys can be experts for your clients. All right, very good. We got some Florida in the house. Do we got anyone from Chicago? I know it's crazy down there right now. Yes. All right. So let's say you are, or your client is on Credit Karma, or let's not even use that word because everyone, let's say your client is on a website trying to research their credit, right? And a lot of these websites that, you try to research your credit, they have all this amazing advice. And one of the things that they always tell people to do when they're trying to get their credit scores up is apply for a credit card. One of the reasons why they tell people to apply for a credit card is because, as we talked about last week, credit cards are one of the main ways that you can build your score. But also, another reason why they're always pushing you to apply for a credit card is because a lot of these websites get kickbacks when you apply for a credit card using their website. It's kind of like some of these websites are literally just designed so that you use them to get credit cards and they get kickbacks. Okay. So they're always going to push you to get a credit card. But when you have specific goals, you're trying to get your scores as high as possible, you want to look at the whole part of your credit report before you make moves. Okay. You want to talk to a credit coach like me or someone on my team so that you can really understand what is the best way for you to get your scores up. Okay. So let's say you go on one of these websites, or your client goes on one of these websites, and you guys get a new card. Okay. The client gets a new card. They get one new card because the website was like, if you get this new card, your scores will go up, right? And remember, we're talking about the same client who has one 10-year-old credit card and one 2-year-old auto loan. There's nothing else open on their credit report. Okay. Now, if you get a brand new card, that means that card is 1 month old. Okay. 1 month old. So now we're going to average the age of file. Hey, how you doing? Now we're going to average the age of file with 3 accounts. So we have a 2-year-old auto loan, a 10-year-old credit card, and a 1 month old card. So now we are dividing 12, right? 10 plus 2 is 12. Now we're dividing 12 by 3 accounts. So 3 into 12 makes your average age of file go down from 6 years down to 4 years because you got a brand new credit card. Okay. So I've seen people's scores, and especially in this situation, I've seen people's scores actually drop because they got a brand new credit card. And in this situation, the score would most likely drop because you're moving your average age of file down from 6 years down to 4 years. Okay. What it shows the banks is that your average age of file shows the banks how long you've been playing this credit game, how long um, you've you have had credit, right? So it's in their minds, they're like, okay, I'd rather work with someone who is more seasoned, right? If you've had credit or your average age of file is 6 years old, you've been in the game longer, you know how to play this game, you're going to pay me back. Now if I'm looking at someone's account and their average age of file is 4 years, you're like, okay, you've been doing this for a while, but it's not as good as this other person who had 6 years. Okay. So, and so we just talked about adding one card. A lot of these websites will give you this beautiful, I'm being sarcastic, but a lot of these websites, they give you all these tricks to fix your credit. And I've heard one of my clients said that she's doing the waterfall effect, the waterfall credit trick, and I was like, what is that? And she's like, well, how it works is I pay my credit cards twice a month, once on the 1st and then once on the 13th. I charge it on the 17th and I pay it on the 1st and then I pay it on the 13th. And then I have to get 5 credit cards in 2 days. So I get 3 credit cards today and 2 credit cards, the next day, and did it like this whole elaborate thing. And I was like, oh my God, are you serious? And so I looked at her credit report and she had 5 brand new credit cards that had showed up on her credit report. And she's like, I don't understand why the trick isn't working. The problem is when you add 5 accounts, let's just take the same person, right, who started off with 2 accounts, right? And the average age of file was 6 years because one card was 10 years old and one auto loan was 2 years old. If they just added 4 new credit cards to their credit profile, what would happen is that 12 would now be divided by 6 instead of being divided by 2. So that means just by adding 4 new credit cards to that account, the age of file drops from 6 years old down to 2 years old. So be careful. When you are about to buy a house, buy a car, you want to be, your credit is precious. It will save you thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars, depending on the size of the house or the size of the car you buy. So it's super important to literally make sure, you talk to, or you have your client talk to a professional about it, because adding a whole bunch of new accounts is literally would hurt your credit score. Now, the opposite of adding brand new accounts to your credit report to help your average age of file, to help this 15%, to help you get to that 800 score, the opposite of that is one of everyone's favorites, which is an authorized user account. An authorized user account. Let me know, have you ever heard of an authorized user account? Yes. All right. So authorized user accounts are a big ticket because that is one of the only ways that you can actually add years to your credit report. Let's say you have an auntie or an auntie or uncle or your mom or so that has a credit card that's, let's say, 20 years old, right? And they're always on time with their credit card. Of course, they keep the balance, low, right? We talked about you want to keep your balance between 1% and 10%. If the card is older than 7 years, you can keep your balance between 0% and 10%. Let's just keep it simple. It's your aunt, right? And your aunt has a 20-year-old card and she keeps it at 0 basically every month. She never charges it over 10%. What she can do is your aunt can add you as an authorized user, right? And if she adds you as an authorized user, then that 20-year-old card, all of those, months of on-time payments will show up on your credit report, okay, which will dramatically affect your credit report. Let's just take the same person, has a 10-year-old credit card plus a 2-year-old auto loan. Now they got their auntie's 20-year-old credit card on there. So now we're looking at instead of 10 plus 20 is 30 plus 2, that's 32 years, right? You divide that by 3 because it's 3 open accounts. So that means the average age of file is over 10 years old. Anytime your average age of file is over 7, what is that? 800 scores, y'all. As long as everything else is good. You don't have no late payments, your cards aren't maxed out, all that good stuff. So auntie adding you to a 20-year-old card would literally get you guys to that 800 score. Okay. So I always say when you have someone like that, like you tell them you're gonna name your 4th child after them, because it really can change your whole credit profile. When you have 20-year-old cards, 15-year-old cards on your credit report, it just lets the banks know that you've been in this game for a long time and you know how to play it. I have, 700, 800 credit scores. I have 20-year-old credit cards. Those types of credit profiles, they're the ones that get the $30,000 credit cards, the $50,000 credit cards, all that good stuff. So you want to have old accounts on your credit report. And as we know, anytime you get, there's 2 types of credit. So there is your revolving credit, that's your credit cards. And there's also like loans, right? Whenever you have a loan, an auto loan, a mortgage, a student loan, whenever you have a loan, doesn't matter how long you've had that loan. You can have that student loan for 40 years. Doesn't matter how long you've had that loan. When you finish paying off that loan, what happens? The account closes. The account closes. So all those years of you paying it on time no longer help your average age of file. The only types of accounts that will stay on your credit report, even when you pay it down to 0, are credit cards. That is why we tell people never to close credit cards. You want to keep cards open for as long as possible. Sometimes the bank may go bankrupt and close it. Sometimes if you don't use the card for a long period of time, like a year or 2 years, they may close it, right? But you want to keep cards open. You keep cards open, not only will it help your scores get to those possible 800s, but also you could be somebody's auntie. You could be somebody's auntie that's helping them out. When you have 20-year-old cards, you put your child or your niece or nephew on that card, that will add 20 years of positive history to their credit profile. I remember I was helping one client and I helped her get her scores up. And I was like, you got a 20-year-old card. You need to, she was talking about her daughter. Her daughter didn't have credit yet. And I was like, you need to add her to this card. She added her to one card, and one 20-year-old card. Her daughter, I think, was 17. She had 780 credit scores just by being added to her mom's card. 780 credit scores just by being added to her mom's card. She didn't have nothing else on her credit. No collections, no card notes, no nothing, right? So what I told her to do after that is, help your daughter get a card, her own card in her own name, and then so she can start building her own credit. Because at some point, you're going to have to be removed from your aunt's card. Or at some point, you may have to remove your niece or nephew or child from your card, okay? Authorized users are temporary. They are not a permanent fix, everyone. This is super important. They are temporary. You always want to look at them as temporary. If you think that it's permanent, you might be in for a surprise, okay? Things happen. Nothing is permanent. Things happen. Your aunt may need to use the card. It may be Christmas, and your aunt's like, I want to spoil, all my grandkids or, whatever. I'm about to use this card. You say, okay, thank you, auntie, for having me on this card. Please remove me before you start using it. Why? Because when she starts using it, because it's on your credit, let's say she uses 50% of the card, it's going to negatively affect your 30% of your score, which has to do with the balances on your credit cards. So remember, it's temporary. You want to be whoever you're adding on as an authorized user or you're being added on to, you want them to know what your goals are, and you want them to be upfront. You want them to say, you know what, I think I might have to use this card. Bonita, I might have to use this card, so I'm gonna have to remove you from it. Thank you, no problem. Please remove me before it starts to go up. Or I'm gonna close this card. I need to remove you from it. That is fine. Sometimes people want to close their own cards. It's their prerogative. But you can't be dependent on someone as an authorized user. It is a good way to jumpstart your credit. Let's say you want to buy a house and you want to just add some years, right? But when I explained to the woman, even though you helped your daughter get to a 780, I think it was like a 780, 760, even though you helped her get to these high scores, she can't be dependent on you, because as soon as you remove this card, she will go back down to having no credit, not having good enough credit. So she has to build her own credit. So she had to get her own card. Okay. So everyone, please remember, authorized users are a temporary, temporary fix. Okay. Now, so you want to make sure that you are talking to the person who you add as an authorized user, and that you guys are in the same boat. Now, when someone adds you as an authorized user, a credit card with your name shows up at their house. You can never call the bank and say, can you send a credit card to my house? I know you sent it to my aunt's house, but I want you to send it to my house. The bank will say, no, we can only send it to the primary account holder. Okay. So that is something you want to tell them. You want to tell them there's no way for me to actually use your credit unless you give me the card. Okay. So a lot of people are like, well, I don't know if I want to add you as an authorized user because I don't want your credit to affect my credit, or I don't want anything to happen to my credit. I love my 800 credit scores and I don't want you to mess with it. Okay. You tell them that a card will come to their house with your name on it. And then what you're going to say is, I'm not trying to use your credit. I'm not trying to use your money. I just want, all of those months, all those years of you paying on time to show up on my credit to help boost my scores. Okay. Now, the second thing you're going to tell them is you're going to tell them to cut the card up. You're going to say, the card that comes to your house that says Bonita Grant on it, cut it up. I need you to cut the card up. Do not use it. Just cut it up. The reason why you want to say that, and I'm telling you just as much as I tell you, this is temporary, but things change. Okay. You might fall out with the auntie. You don't know. You have no idea. The auntie might be going through, some hard times and doesn't feel comfortable telling you. And before you know it, something may show up, like a late payment may show up, and it shows up on your credit report too, right? But if there's never been a time that credit card was used, meaning they cut it up right away before they use it, they don't go and charge some gas real quick, and that's the only one charge they did, is if there's never been a time that they've actually used the card, or that card has been used, you can call the bank and you can say, I don't know how this thing showed up on my credit report. I don't have no clue. I think it might have been an accident. I don't know anything about this. I just saw something on my credit report and it says late payment, but I don't actually have a Discover card. So I don't know where this came from. And if they can prove that card was never used, they can look in the system and they can see that the card's never been used. If they can see that the card has never been used, then it is way easier to get it off your credit report. But if that card has been used one time, if the card was used for gum one time, any debt charged on that card is your responsibility, along with your aunties, right? God forbid something happens with your auntie and she charged the card up and then she didn't want to pay it ever again, and she doesn't pay it, it will be, let's say she charged it up to $10,000. That $10,000, even though you only charge, or she only charged one piece of gum on that card, you are also liable for any debt. You are liable for the whole $10,000. So I always tell people, please please put in the chat, cut it up. If you don't hear anything from me, if you actually get an authorized user account, you have a great aunt that has good credit and wants to share it with you, you have to remember, cut it up, cut the card, because things change. Okay. All right. One other tip I want to give you before I let you guys go today is, hold on, let me get my notes. Oh, it doesn't matter. A lot of people are like, okay, yes, I have an aunt. She has excellent credit. I'm just going to have her put me on her cards. You don't need multiple cards. You need maybe one, maybe two. The goal is to have older cards. If your aunt has, great credit, that's great. It does not mean that every credit card that she has is going to help your credit report. If it is a card that she is utilizing more than 10%, you don't want to be on that card. If it's a card that has a $40,000 limit, but it's only been open for a year, you don't want to be on that card. Okay. You want to be on older cards that she barely uses. That is what you want. And you don't need to be on. I remember I was working with one client and she had low 600 credit scores. And I was looking at her, I was like, what is this? She literally had 8 authorized user accounts on her credit report. She had no primary users. She did not actually own or have her own credit card that she was the primary user. She just had 8 authorized user accounts on her credit report. And some of them were like 30 years old. I'm like, how do you have 30-year-old cards and you're still in the low sixes? 2 reasons. One is because she didn't have any that were her own. She did not have a primary account. So we got her a primary account that raised her score. The other is she had one 30-year-old card, and then the other cards were all less than a year old. So remember, when we're talking about average age of file, those year-old cards started to dilute the 30-year-old average, right? So I had her remove herself from the young cards. I had her remove herself from I think 6 of the young cards. So she only kept 2 authorized users, one that was 30 and one that was 10 years old. And then I got her own credit card. She kept it at 10%, and literally she was able to get to the 800 scores. But because she had too many authorized users and they weren't the right ones, one of the authorized user accounts that she had on hers was 50% utilized. That was killing her credit. So not every card that your aunt has is the best card for you. And it does not matter if your aunt has great credit. You want to look at each card specifically, okay? And say, all right, this is a 30-year-old card. This is a 15-year-old card. She always keeps this low. That's a good card. It doesn't matter if it's 30 years old and she's always maxed out on it. That's not a good card. It doesn't matter if it's a $40,000 limit and it's only a year old. That's not a great card. And the last thing I want to give you guys is American Express is the only card that I know of when you are added to it. It doesn't matter if the American Express is 30 years old. When you're added to it, it starts from the month that you're added to it. So it doesn't give you all 30 years. It starts as if it's a brand new account. So if you're going to be added as an authorized user to add age to your file, I would not suggest an American Express. Okay. All right, y'all. I hope I gave you some good information. If you have any clients that need help with their credit, if you need help with your credit, please do not hesitate to reach out to me. My phone number is here. Also, if you have any bilingual clients or clients that only speak Spanish, we can take on those clients too. I hope it was helpful. Please put in the chat anything new that you learned, or if it was helpful, please let me know. Also put in the chat, because I'll go back to the chat, any questions that you have. Okay. I know you guys are eating your food and having lunch break. But next week, what we're going to talk about is inquiries. Everybody's favorite. I don't know why. That's the first thing you guys talk about when you call me. I need you to get these inquiries off my credit. So we're going to talk about that and any other questions you guys have. But I hope I gave you guys some good information today. And I hope you have a great rest of your Tuesday. All right. Have a good one, y'all.